Raila Odinga. What does that mean? She is currently the Cabinet Secretary for Water, Irrigation, Sanitation. And we're asking the question, has the government delivered on its promises of clean water for all? Cicely Kariuki, my guest on the bench now. Good to see you.
Thank you. Nice to have me.
You look great.
Thank you.
Look at that red color on TV. Yes, somebody told you. So,
thank you, Jeff.
Okay. But you've been very quiet lately. Let's admit it. You've been very quiet. What happened?
A time comes and you're deliberate about the work you're doing and the impact you'd want to leave. In particular, looking that we are the tail end of President Uhuru Kenyatta's administration. Remember, I moved to the water sector hardly 2 years ago. By the time you learn the engineering issues around water, by the time you get around to understand the reform agenda, identify the gaps, want to make a mark, you don't just keep talking about it. I have been to virtually every corner of this country, inspecting projects, making sure that if there are any bottlenecks, they're unlocked, and therefore I've been harder to work. I've been harder to work.
Yeah.
Very deliberate, because I wanted to show up when I have a story to tell. I have a story to tell.
Okay, so you say you've been to every corner of this country. What does that mean? When people start complaining that they have to walk miles, kilometers to get clean water?
Well, Jeff, provision of water is a process. I'm happy to note that a process that, as Jubilee government, when we moved in, the water coverage was at 53%. To date, I'm proud to note that we are at 70% in terms of population coverage. That is water. And when you look at it, obviously, you're also dealing with these issues of equity. You are dealing with issues of source. You're dealing with issues of resources, which are limited because we have to fall within the medium-term planning and MTEF framework, resources. You know, and so, yeah, I came into a space where we are talking of 650-plus projects at different stages of execution in all the corners of this country. And therefore, for me, just making a demand that we speed up to be able to deliver is what has kept me away from a lot of these spaces.
Yeah.
But then again, when you go to Mashinani, you'll be able to find my footprint quite a bit, because I'm dealing with the communities there where the water is required. And, you know, have the time, I choose to go to the smaller projects that we are likely to forget, and not so much the huge projects where everybody is attracted to, say, inspect or ask questions whether they are moving or not.
Before I get to the big projects, name a couple of examples of the Mashinani projects you talk about, like where?
I will talk about Turkana, and I'll talk about a beautiful irrigation project called Katilu irrigation project. People that would hitherto only remain with the livestock sector and nomads, and they are moving all over looking for pasture, are now able to produce some of the best melons, some of the best vegetables in Turkana. I visited with them. I will go to Machakos, a deep of Machakos, and I will find a project that under His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta was initiated for the first time, household pans, to be able to give 26,000 homesteads water pans that they do harvest water currently, and they are able to farm. Using this project in a place like West Pokot, we have gentlemen who would otherwise be actually raiding the neighborhood to get cows out, are currently farming and taking produce to market. And again, talk about Lamu, talk about Kilifi, talk about Nyeri, talk about Meru, talk about Kirugoya, talk about Isiolo. These are places that I have gone to interact with projects, just to make sure, again, wow, you hold people a little more accountable. They know that somebody is watching. I expect reports to come back, but I also needed to use the same to be able to appreciate what are the challenges that may be facing some of the people, some of the contractors, some of the employers, and therefore bring in a mechanism of unlocking the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet, at the same time, water is the biggest source of the conflict in Laikipia County, for instance.
That's
right?
Also true. That's also
People just, moving their cattle just to get water. Yes. That's all they want.
Yes.
And now look at it's blown up out of proportion.
Well, look at it and put it in the context of failed rains, for example, because you may have these dams that we have in the administration. We have upwards of 1,100 water pans and dams that are complete. Now, if the rain fails, it means that we don't even have the source of the water to fill into these dams. And therefore, whenever there is conflict like what we're experiencing right now, it is because half the time there has been a failure in rains. Now, unfortunately for us, we are right in that space without very positive outlook of the weather in terms of the short rain season. It's going to be here and there. We are not expecting a very good rain, in this coming season. The Met tell us we are in the La Nina season, and therefore, despite of the investment, it is just what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, the other day I learned three very crucial terms: conflict, climate change, and COVID.
Yes.
If you've had a tough 18 months being at the center of it all in the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation.
Indeed, I mean, it's a space that we have not walked through as a country, but is a space which I also am happy to note that taking on a whole government approach with a lot of deliberate interventions, with a lot of consultations, with great leadership in all the spaces, we have come out not as badly hit as you would have expected. If you look at COVID, for example, I was getting out of the health space as COVID was actually visiting us and visiting the globe. And through a mechanism that brought all the actors together, spearheaded by Ministry of Health, we were able to come up with very quick, short-term interventions. And it is at that point that we were able to actually have the first 100 boreholes in the informal settlements in Nairobi being sunk, equipped, reticulating water to residents of Nairobi informal settlement inside less than 100 days. And on top of that, the next season was an additional 93 boreholes within the same areas, funded by national government, again within a record further 100 days. So inside 200 days, we were able to have additional water serving 1.2 million Kenyans that would on a normal day be buying water, would not even access water, would not even wash up their hands during that season. And therefore, again, it came to teach us that when we are deliberate, when we consult and plan together, sequence our interventions, prioritize as government, we are able to deliver. And that is why I'm happy to say GOK delivers, because we've seen it in real terms. You
mentioned almost 200 boreholes in 200 days. That's like a borehole a day. Yes. And in 50 years, that had not been possible. I mean, how was that possible?
Well, Jeff, they say innovation comes out of necessity. And here we were. We had to just respond and make sure that there was water around town and that our people were served. And His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was commanding all these interventions, was very, very keen to see that he does not get any excuse from any one of us. And so it happened. Now, on top of that, we were able to invest and open up over 10,000 wash points in the densely populated areas, be it markets, be it the streets, be it institutions. And again, we were able to do that within a very short time. Inside the first 100 days, we did about 6,000 of these water points. The army, everybody was commanded. The teams, water teams from all the corners of the country knew what they had to do, and they had to do what they had to do.
A lot of people ask, how does your ministry work with county government? How does that work?
Well, water is a concurrent function, if you look at the Constitution. Concurrent in the sense that my ministry is responsible for setting the policy direction, regulation, standardization, capacity building, but also ensuring the resource, because water is a shared resource, that there are no conflicts arising out of sharing water resource. What do I say? Water comes from Sasumwa Dam, which is in Nyandarua, finds its way into Nairobi. Bit of it may move towards Machakos in terms of distribution. It is the ministry's business to ensure that there is no conflict as that resource moves to be shared. It is a business of Nairobi County, for example, through Nairobi Water Company, Water Sewerage Company, to ensure that they distribute and the water gets to the home states. The same with the sewerage systems. We come in to do what you look at as a primary infrastructural investment to convey the water, be it the source, that is a dam, be it the main trunks to be able to convey. It is a business of NMS, in this case, working with Nairobi Water to ensure that this moves to the estates. Therefore, we consider the counties to be at the point of last mile connectivity, and that is the investment they are required to ensure goes on. Of course, through my organization, the WRA, Water Resource Authority, the issues of standards, regulations, ensuring management of riparian land, working together with WASREB, that is a Water Service Regulatory Authority. Now, for me, because we remain at the apex with our policies, we also handle very strategic investments only. But the actual implementation of projects, say, in Katilu, in West Pokot, in Kisumu, we have 9 water service, not water service, pardon me, Water Resource Authority. These are divided as per the catchment area, each with a CEO and an independent board, equivalent to what you look at as a SEGA, a state corporation organ, reporting to my office, but with a board that minds the day-to-day business. We get the funding from Treasury. We relay the same depending on the project and the way they are distributed in the regions. And that's how we are structured.
And sometimes when you dig those boreholes, or whoever's digging the boreholes, the sewer level get mixed up with the water level. In some instances, there's been lots of complaints. In rare cases, we have gotten those reports, particularly in the rainy season, whenever there are bursts of pipes, for example. And you want to appreciate that part of the infrastructure is also infrastructure that was invested in the 70s. So what we are doing currently in the major towns, because of the population influx, because of sometimes bad manners when people have to, drive over or lay materials or even construct on top of sewer lines, we are now rehabilitating, but also carrying on a lot of civic education, that for you as a Kenyan, it's good for you to have good manners when it comes to public infrastructure investment. We've seen, and I'm sure you've moved around town, and you have seen even manhole covers being pulled out and they are being sold out or they are being taken to other places. So we are investing in also saying it is your business to mind the business of water infrastructure. At the same time, there's a human cost to development.
Yeah.
Recently, Mukuru kwa Jenga slums, demolitions happening. I mean, how do you explain that?
I mean, Jeff, we unfortunately, again, in my time, we've had to repossess 8 parcels of public land in Nairobi that was set aside for expansion of infrastructure. It was anticipated in the 70s. Population in Nairobi will continue to grow, meaning, therefore, wastewater management, which is currently being directed towards Dandora, required reserve land for us as the population grows, for us to be able then to expand the processing capacity. But you have a team of business people, a team of civilian guys coming in, taking over 4,200 public land reserved for a very specific reason many years ago, and taking occupation and wanting to put in structures. Now, the question then comes, so we are working on the infrastructure upstream. The population has moved to close to the it's past 5 million mark in Nairobi now. We do not have a place to expand and direct the wastewater for treatment. Again, simple common sense. Unfortunately, some of the civilians would fall victim of whomever you would want to consider a cartel or just a careless, opportunistic business person. Glad to say that we had to move in as national government, and we took back, we repossessed this land. And
are the locals compensated in any way?
They had been compensated from what I understood in the records that we got previously, but they got back again. They got back again, and therefore they had to move.
You know, you use a very polite term, you say civilians, but these are cartels. Let's call it what they are. These are mafia, they are cartel. Yes. How do you fight the cartel? How do you fight the mafia in this city?
Well, by doing what it is we did. I mean, just vacate, move. We want to direct poo-poo where it belongs. We want to treat it. It's good for everyone. It has health connotations. but it also has economic and developmental connotations. So just move off. And we did actually take over the property. And but to take over, not to take over and keep it, we had to take over and commence infrastructural development immediately, because that was the use intended. Yes.
You know, someone just mentioned on Twitter that you talk about the human-wildlife conflict and digging boreholes. There's a place in Kajiado where people cannot get to a borehole because it's surrounded by elephants. I don't know if you heard that, but you know, there's some places where it's impossible to reach the boreholes.
Again, this is where a whole government approach comes in. And, you know, while my primary concern would be ensuring that water is available to human beings, I want to believe it's Najib's business to also ensure that, you know, the livestock, not the livestock, the wildlife have access to water. But we've been in a conversation, particularly where we can be able to have the water being trucked closer by or further deeper into the bushes, so that then you can keep the animals out there. And this is where we call on strategic actors like KDF, for example, in a conversation where they are able to access, working with KWS, access spaces so that we then can be able to have a secure space for human beings to be able to do what they need to do and access water. Tomorrow morning, we'll be waking up to a multi-agency team meeting headed by Professor Kobia, who is coordinating this drought response for us within national government. And these are the kind of issues that come up, and we are able to articulate the concerns and are able to also put in a rapid response to some of these emerging issues.
Yeah. Look, you were transferred from the Ministry of Health to Water right around COVID. Did you look in the mirror and say, "Oh, lucky me"?
Well, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, God's timings is always the best, but I have a job to do. Crossing over the other side, I am not going on holiday either. I must go and give interventions that would support the response in terms of this, because water was a big issue. Even before we moved to sanitizers and use of that, water was a big issue. And therefore, moving there, I was very clear that I wasn't going on holiday. But going there also, I knew that there were projects that had been delayed in terms of completion timelines, and I also knew the job was cut out for me. Yes.
Tell me something, why do mega water projects attract mega corruption, especially when it comes to construction of dams?
I don't know how to respond to a question like that, because fortunately for me, I've not had to walk through any of this. I must say I'm very lucky. But it all comes to, what is it you're trying to really leave behind for a legacy? If it is a dam, however big, that impacts 100,000 persons, why don't you get deliberate to question whether indeed the investment and the return on investment is going to yield that impact now and in the long term? And I have learned in life that you got to be just a bit deliberate, the journeys you want to walk. If the journey you chose to walk was one that you're actually moving a project so that you remove chunks of money out of it, that's where you belong, and that is how you are going to respond. But if yours is to leave an impact, then I'm not so sure you'll be disrupted by people who want to come and remove, you know, these other negative thing out of it. And I must say I am lucky, because I'm also working with professionals that if you challenge issues, we're able to get back, interrogate and say, is this best value? And if it isn't, how do we then respond? Yeah.
Look, when it comes to drought, you talked about drought a moment ago, right? You know, it's not your fault. It's not our fault. It's climate change. Right? And the president did declare an emergency in the north, didn't he? Because of drought and famine.
He did.
So does that make, obviously, that makes your work a lot more challenging?
It does. And given also that when we are responding in a time such as now, it is both in terms of food, because, you know, crop has failed and people cannot fend for themselves. It is also in making sure that water is available for people. It is also making sure that livestock, that is also going to suffer or even die because there is no pasture and there is no water, that there is a response. And therefore, yes, as government, we have put in mechanisms to be able to respond. We've also gotten a lot of support from partners. And I'm happy to note government's commitment that nobody is going to die because we are not, one, able to avail relief food by way of either physical food or where we are moving to cash transfer, or because of lacking in water. And that we have my teams, the 9 teams I spoke about who cover the country, are busy ensuring that they are tracking water to the hotspots that have been identified, that they are availing storage capacity to those hotspots, and therefore also making sure, working with the NDMA and the other actors in the counties, including the county government, that the institutions where we also have our children, for example, water is availed on a program that is predetermined by them. I get feedback on a weekly basis how that is happening, and hopefully by the time we get to December, we'll be getting additional resources to be able to continue to cover the failed short rain season as well. My colleagues availing food, that is Professor Margaret Kobia, are working hard as well with the team to ensure that food reaches the most needy persons. Right now, a target of 2.5 million Kenyans are exposed. My colleagues within the defense system are also having resources for offtake, that they are buying the animals which are about to die, and they are able to also turn them into food that would otherwise go to waste. And therefore, my colleagues here as the attorney is busy trying to balance the books and make sure that each one of these main actors has resources to be able to do what they need to do. Routine consultations, routine monitoring on what's happening on the ground, rapid response as the need comes, and therefore, again, just to assure Kenyans that we are working hard at it, and that help will keep coming as and where it's needed.
You've been in either CS or PS now for what, nearly a decade, about 9 years?
Yes, 9 years.
What's the end game for Cicely Kariuki?
Well, right now, I am supervising implementation of 650 water, sanitation, and irrigation projects. Most of them must be delivered by the time President Uhuru Kenyatta is ready to go home. And therefore, I am extremely very preoccupied just making sure that it's all falling in place and working well, from the small project to the big project.
650?
650.
In 9 months?
Well, most of them are at different stages of execution or implementation, I must say. Very few of them are startups. And startups that we have, the big ones that are startups, are about only 3. One is Mwache Dam in Kwale. One is going to be Bute Dam, which is going to be in Marsabit. The other one that is upcoming is one in Kiambu. Those are the large ones, startup. We have smaller ones, and by small I mean anywhere in the range of 1 billion per project. We have a few that are going through contracting processes. The bulk of the others are either 85% complete, meaning by December to April they will be completed. The others are anywhere between 50 to 85% complete, meaning again by the time we go to June they will also be complete, and we have the rest of them falling and rolling over to the next season. Yeah. And therefore, really my day-to-day business is holding the teams accountable to make sure that there are no delays.
I see you avoided answering my question. The end game for Cicely Kariuki. What do you want to do after this? Politics? Because you were in Nyandarua last week, and you said, if I'm here at a Raila Odinga rally, it means something. This is your quote.
Jeff, you're a politician, aren't you?
I'm not.
Oh, that's why you bring it here.
Never.
We were on water. Now look where you take me.
Are you standing?
It's a process. It's not a switch on, switch off kind of process. Jeff, anybody and talk to any politician. I see you host a lot of them here on Wednesdays. It is not a decision that you wake up and say, I am running for X, Y seat. It is such a process. Consult, secure support, be confident that you can do it, speak to yourself, and if all that comes together, then you're ready to start going. I ain't reached there yet because, like I said, I am so preoccupied on the 650 projects. It's a process.
That's another way of saying stay tuned, right?
is a process. We'll be back soon.
All right, and we'll be back after this break. Wow, you are so diplomatic. I can see governor written all over this, but you know, maybe it's just me. Let's take a break, come back. And there's lots of questions from viewers, by the way. Lots of questions. We're asking, has the government delivered on its promise of clean water for all? Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag JK Live. JK Live takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you ready to dance in the Holy Ghost?
Welcome to the new home of gospel music.